Welcome again to the second annual VegFest of Eastern Iowa. Again, my name is Preston Moore. In case you want to complain about how long I talked to the organizers, you can use my name. Before we get started with our keynote speaker day, we would like to again thank our presenting sponsors, Brightside Kitchen, A Well-Fed World, and Yelp of Iowa City. These events take a lot of time and effort and money to put on, so without their support, this event would not be possible, so thank you to them. We also want to acknowledge our supporting sponsors for the event, Trumpet Blossom Cafe, Veg Fund, and New Pioneer Food Co-op. You can clap for them if you'd like to clap. They didn't clap at the last one, so good job. Please take some time today and look through the event programs and check out all the donors who helped make this possible. All of the donors, both big and small, have made this event, I think, a really big success. I couldn't believe the line of people out front waiting to get in this morning, and we're still packed, so we're happy to see you all here. But now, to the main show. We're very excited to welcome Jenny Brown here today. We're very lucky to have her here. Jenny Brown is a longtime animal rights activist and the co-founder of the Woodstock Farm Sanctuary in New York. Previously, she worked in film and television, but an experience in Texas going undercover to document stockyard conditions led to her change of course, and then she dedicated her life to farm animal advocacy. After 12 years, Jenny left the sanctuary to focus on a national lecture tour, raising awareness about the plight of animals that are used and abused in food production, something that we all know a whole lot about here in Iowa. This isn't on the list, but if you don't know, we have 3 million people in the state and we produce 80 million hogs for human consumption every year. So it's very important to hear what she has to say. Jenny's story and the work of the sanctuary has been featured in the New York Times, New York Magazine, CNN, the Diane Rehm Show, and many, many more. She's the author of The Lucky Ones, My Passionate Fight for Farm Animals, and you can learn more about her work on her website, theveganspeaker.com. Otherwise, we're just all really looking forward to hearing about your experience and I think the eye-opening information you're going to be giving everybody, so we're all excited to have you here. Jenny Brown.
So hi, thank you for being here. This is really awesome that Iowa has a VegFest. Woo! It's amazing. And I know a lot of people come to these things for the food, which I totally get. I'm here for the food and for the camaraderie. But what I'm going to be talking about is the least favorite part of these events, where we talk about the reality of why many of us are moving towards a vegan diet. And it's all about eating animals. It's an incredibly uncomfortable subject for many people. Eating animals is often an incredibly contentious subject, whether you're talking about the ethical or the environmental or the health-related aspects of production and consumption. But finally, especially in the last decade, a growing number of people, thanks to social media, thanks to some great films, a growing number of people are talking about this issue and busting out their tools and their knowledge and information to be better informed consumers and to have these difficult conversations with one another. So as we know, I mean, humans have created a hierarchy that's allowed us to normalize and justify the oppression of other animals. But when you stop and think critically about it, what gives us the right to exploit, to breed into existence, to abuse, and kill other animals when we have other options? And so I would not be out giving this lecture to the Eskimos out in the Arctic who have to kill a seal and something to feed their family. I'm talking about for those of us in the developed world. This is an incredibly important subject. This is arguably the most urgent social justice movement of our time because of the terrible mistreatment of just so many other earthlings, and because of the growing evidence that eating animals is detrimental to our health and to the environment. So, unlike animals who kill other animals for food, they do so out of necessity, whereas humans do so for basically reasons like convenience, taste, habit, and tradition. But there's a vast moral difference between killing animals for necessity and killing animals for pleasure. And for many of us, I mean, I know I'm in a farming state here, but for most of us, we never see these animals. We don't know who they are. We don't know how they live. We don't know how they died. Meat comes from the supermarket. It arrives in front of us on plates. It's enclosed in a bun. It's wrapped in plastic. It doesn't resemble an animal at all. And we can be manipulated to believe in things and believe it devoutly, like farm animals are treated humanely, or that such a thing even exists. So about me, though, I want you guys to know, so I lived in New York for many years. I've just moved back to my hometown of Louisville, Kentucky, which is where I'm from. And so I think it's important to note, because I did not grow up in this like liberal, tree-hugging, pot-smoking, hippie family at all. I grew up in a Southern Baptist household in Louisville, Kentucky. And like most kids, I loved animals, but I never thought about those animals on my plate. And so, especially then in Kentucky, I loved me some KFC. I loved pizza. We did a lot of Southern cooking, and most of the greens even cooking on our stove would be like flavored with a ham hock, which is like a pig knuckle. So it wasn't until, so I was a normal little kid here, in gymnastics, played t-ball, went to church every Sunday morning, Sunday evening, Wednesday evening at church camp. But it wasn't until I was 10 years old that I got cancer. And I lost, wish there was a stage here, because you've got to see my new rockin' Victorian lace thick leg cover, okay, what? Right? Feeling kind of jealous, I get that, because I'm like morphing into a superior species. Totally get that, okay? What really rocks is when I put a little strand, an LED strand in there, lights. But finally I was able, when I was a kid, because I wanted a pet, now I call them animal companions, I wanted a pet so bad. It took me having my leg cut off and be like, Mom, I'm going to play that cancer card now. Can I have a pet? And so this girl, so this is me, this is the only picture that exists of me when I was really sick, 10 years old, sporting a Pac-Man shirt, no wig on, because as a child, losing my hair was almost as bad as losing my leg. But with that horrible illness came a being who entered my life and made such a profound impact. And she was with me from the time I was 10 to 28 years old. And like any of us who share our homes with cats and dogs and other animal companions, we can look in their eyes and we see that there's somebody there. They're individuals. They are sentient. They're self-aware. They have thoughts and feelings and emotions. They have the same 5 physiological senses. They're very much like us, even though their faces may not show the same emotions. We don't understand their voices oftentimes. We know that, and for those of us who believe in souls, I put myself in the agnostic category now, I'm spiritual, and so if I have a soul, I am very confident that animals have souls. And so even at a young age, when I was 10 years old, my relationship with this cat, whose original name was Booger, because I was a really gross kid, I shortened it to Boogie. Boogie, for me, I just realized it can't just be that humans are the only ones who get to go to heaven. This is an idea of mine. So my relationship with this cat really planted a seed for me and looking at animals in a different light. So I became like a hardcore animal lover, chemotherapy for 2 years, couldn't go to school, so I spent so much time with this cat. But so even though I was a hardcore animal lover, my first job was at McDonald's. Welcome to the 80s, okay? That is, by the way, it's a lot of hours banked in a tanning bed, and then it's some big hair, and I'm gonna own it, because we should own our past, okay? So my first job, though, is somebody who always professed and talked about loving animals so much, never thought about that perfectly round patty that I was serving up hundreds of times a day, having come from a someone who could think and feel and suffer every bit as much as my beloved Boogie. And so fast forward, I started college. During college orientation week, I picked up some literature, 18 years old in Louisville, Kentucky. The first time, I mean, this is, grab some literature out here, okay? It changed my life. It was the first time I read about animals used and abused on fur farms, animals in medical experimentation, which I thought a lot about because I had a lot of chemotherapy and spent a lot of time in hospitals. Animal experiments for cosmetic purposes and the companies behind that, and finally started looking at how we treat the animals we eat. It was a plethora of PETA literature there for the taking. And so just in picking that up, it changed my life. It opened my eyes to the reality of how we treat these other earthlings. And remember, we're animals too. So I ended up, fast forward, because limited time I have to talk here, moved to Chicago, went to film school, studied cinematography and videography, ended up doing some undercover video for PETA in the early 90s, various other animal rights groups during that time, during the 90s. But my biggest claim to fame early on was getting into a Premarin facility in North Dakota. Millions of women in this country take a drug called Premarin, which is like a female estrogen replacement therapy, and it comes from the urine of pregnant horses who are being kept in stalls and with urine collection bags, and then the foals are sold off to slaughter, and they're impregnated over and over again. But it wasn't until I went undercover for an organization called Farm Sanctuary in 2003, and they had sent me to Texas to document what's known as downers, downed animals at stockyards and the auction houses, animals who are non-ambulatory and cannot get up and walk onto the trucks to take them to slaughter. And the thing is that animals have to be alive when they reach the slaughterhouse floor. They can't be sold for human consumption if they arrive dead. So the way they treat these animals and force them onto these trucks, if you can imagine a 1,500-pound cow who can't walk, who front legs are chained, attached to a winch on a truck, winched up, you can hear bones breaking. Anyway, I'll spare you guys that footage. But the things that I saw that week changed my life. It changed my life, and it made me, I left my career in film and television. I went to work for Farm Sanctuary, which is an organization just like the amazing Iowa Farm Sanctuary who's here. So I went to work at this place to learn about who these animals are, and I also wanted to start my own sanctuary, because my having visited there, Farm Sanctuary in upstate New York, was the first time I was around these animals, who again are largely invisible in our society. But at sanctuaries, animals have names and not numbers, and they're someone's and not some things. They're seen and treated as the individuals that they are. And so many of them behave very differently than if you were to see them on a production farm. Most of us don't even visit production farms. And it's great because the mission of most farmed animal sanctuaries is twofold. You rescue farmed animals in need from abuse, neglect, abandonment, but then you also bring the public in, and that is a great opportunity to have this captive audience, and then you lay the truth bombs on those people, and you tell them about just like how Andy here, who was rescued when he was a veal calf, how they live and die, and making the connection like with veal and dairy, which I'm going to do for you today if you don't know. So, because in our society, we're taught to think of animals raised for food, if we think of them at all, as this kind of abstract category. Farm animals, these nameless, faceless herds and flocks. We don't think of them as individuals, but they very, very much are. And they oftentimes get as much, this is Fawn, who we were talking about. They oftentimes get as much from it than we do. Like Fawn here, who's so over the top, who was rescued when she was just a calf, had really messed up legs, had surgery. But anyway, she from a very young age was loved and treated with kindness because she was rescued from a dairy operation before they were going to kill her. And so this is a girl who, like, after this camp group, we got up and walked away, she just followed around like her low moo, wanting people to give her some love. And so they can be so incredibly affectionate and attention-seeking, so much like our beloved cats and dogs. Or like Story the sheep, we had others, Ashton and Marin. you just scratch them and they love it so much, they come running up to you as soon as you go in the barn, and when you stop scratching them, just like some dogs will give you the paw and want you to keep on petting on them, Story will hoof you. She will give you the hoof. Like, and it hurts. When I put my fake leg out in front of it, I'm just like, also good for like breaking up rooster fights and like, great. So, and also, where else, get thyself to a farm animal sanctuary. And I know that Iowa Farm Sanctuary is close to here. Get yourself to a farm animal sanctuary because A, they're nonprofit organizations that really need the help. B, here's an opportunity you probably haven't had before. Where else can you give a 600-pound pig a belly rub, okay? And cleaning up their poop is fun, that's right. It's fun, and maybe that's what you do as a volunteer, and it's good times, because they don't have opposable thumbs and they need you that way. So, all joking aside, what I do now, after 12 years of running the sanctuary, I left in 2016 for various political reasons within the organization, but also because I am now traveling the country and speaking at universities and colleges, reaching a demographic I think is really open to this message, because college students are at an age and at a time when they're rethinking their earliest indoctrinations and they're buying their own food and they're realizing that everything that their parents taught them was not necessarily true and that they're a product of their cultural indoctrination, just like their parents were a product of their cultural indoctrination. So this is, again, one of the most pressing ethical issues of our time, because nowhere on earth is our disregard for life, for living beings, as stark as it is in our food system. And so there's a lot of violence against animals in the food industry. There's violence against animals in other industries as well. But my activism is focused specifically on farm animals because their suffering is the most invisible and ignored in our society, and also on sheer number alone. They are the most abused and exploited beings on the planet. For comparison here, estimated land animals killed in the U.S. annually in different industries. Fur industry, 4 million. Animal shelter, sadly, 25 million. Hunting, 110 million. Testing, that's for cosmetic testing and also for medical research, 125 million. But none of those numbers compared to the almost 10 billion farmed animals slaughtered every year in this country alone. 70 billion worldwide. And these numbers don't even include sea life, sea creatures. I ain't calling them seafood because they're not swimming carrots. Sea creatures, whose numbers are so great, they're measured in tons. And boy, that's hard to wrap our head around, given that we're on the planet, there's only 7 billion people, right? We raise and slaughter more land animals in this country every year than there are people in the world. And the reason it's hard to wrap our head around that is because this is where most of them are living. These are factory farms, also known as CAFOs, confined animal feeding operations, where animals are living by the thousands, crowded indoors in strict confinement. They will never step foot outside. They'll never feel the sunshine on their back. They'll never feel grass underfoot or do many things that make life worth living to them. And agribusiness doesn't want us to see inside these places. And this is super relevant to Iowa because, oh my Lord, you guys, this is where ag legislation began, which makes it like a serious criminal offense to get inside these places and get footage or photos undercover. And by the way, I'm getting ready to dish your governor, here it comes. So the federal courts overturned ag legislation in January, and your douchey governor immediately signed in like ag 2.0 within weeks of being elected into office. And largely because, and I read, that their biggest campaign contributors, the two private individuals who are their biggest campaign contributors, are the people who own Iowa Select Farms, which I think is the 8th largest pork producer in the country. So this is what I'm talking about, ag-gag. So hear that. It originated here in this state. And you guys need to all be armchair activists and try to kick this woman to the curb like we just did in Kentucky with our douchey governor, okay? Okay? So, get right off this. Agribusiness is funneling money into our politicians' pockets on a state and federal level. They're right up there with oil and pharmaceuticals, and they're paying for campaigns. And that's why many of these abuses are happening. And believe me, in the world of farmed animals, things that we do to these animals as standard farming practice would land you in jail if you did the same to cats or dogs. And agribusiness, again, is calling the shots. They're making the rules. Animals in the meat, dairy, and egg and fur industries receive no legal protection whatsoever. This is an excerpt from Section 2 of the Animal Welfare Act, which is the federal law that oversees animal use in America. When used in this act, the term animal excludes farm animals, such as, but not limited to, livestock and poultry used or intended for use as food. I just want to stop there for a second, because that's a word that I just cannot use, livestock. This is what we've reduced them to. This is how we other them in our mind and in our society. We have a stock market where you buy and you trade and you sell stocks. That's what we've reduced these animals to. Living stock, mere commodities, seen and treated as mere commodities. And we need to change that. As Albert Schweitzer, great humanitarian and theologian, had said, let's think occasionally of the suffering of which we spare ourselves the sight. During my presentation, I normally show some short video clips that are hard to look at of standard farming practices, knowing that people are eating, and there's children in here. I've removed that and replaced it with just some still images, so I want you all to know that. And I do realize, though, that looking at this footage, well, I'm not going to show you, but looking at these images and footage is so incredibly difficult, and we don't want to look at it. It's that comfortable cognitive dissonance. We don't want to know. But when we know better, we do better. And as the late actress and activist Gretchen Weiler said, which to me is so incredibly profound, and this is what I say to all the college students I speak to, we shouldn't refuse to see with our eyes what they must endure with their bodies. So, can I get a hell yeah? So, most people don't realize, but I'm just going to explain, just pull back the curtain on animal agriculture and just give you just a brief overview into what their lives are like. Out of those 10 billion land animals in this country who are killed every year for human consumption, 9 billion of them are chickens. And people don't realize we don't use the same chickens for eggs that we do for meat. Thanks to the efforts of Tyson and Purdue, we've created the Frankenberg, who grows incredibly quickly to reach profitable slaughter weight at 45 days of age. And then we've got these egg-laying chickens, these little skinny commercial egg-laying chickens who can crank out about 300 eggs a year. So all chickens, even though out in nature, mother hens, if you even look up in the dictionary, like somebody calls you a mother hen, it's like helicopter parenting. It's being like fiercely protective mothers, or I'm going to take you under my wing, just because they always have their babies under their wings. Mother hens are incredible. But they have over 24 vocalizations that all mean something different, and they start talking to their chicks when they're still in the shells. But no chickens in this day and age ever meet their mothers. They come from, there's breeding facilities, they take the fertilized eggs, they go to these massive hatcheries, they're hatched in incubators, they come out of their shells, peeping from their mothers, who they'll never meet. And if you're one of the birds who are born into the chicken meat industry, the industry calls them broilers, which is just terribly offensive. Both male and female, from the time they're born, they go to live on these floors of these massive factory farms. They're living in their own waste, day in and day out. Nobody's coming in there and scooching them over and cleaning up the poo from that week. They don't clean it out until all those birds are taken out of there. And they grow so quickly that they're ready for slaughter at 6 weeks. I took this down recently because this blew my mind. The University of Arkansas did a study showing that if a human baby grew at a rate equivalent to these fast-growth chickens, it would be 660 pounds at the age of 2 months old. That is, again, thanks to the efforts of Tyson and Purdue. And that's why many of them lose the ability to walk. They're prisoners in their own bodies. All the emphasis is on breast meat and wing meat and leg meat. No emphasis on their organs or their skeletal structures. So many of them die of heart attacks, or they get crippling leg deformities. They can't even make it over to the food and water. So that's just in the genetics. That's what we've done to them as a species. And that is, she or he, this is the bird they use across this country for meat specifically. Also, they made sure to breed all the colors out of her feathers, because people think dark meat is like unhealthier or more fattening or something. So the color of the feathers has to do with the color of the meat as well. But so I went vegetarian when I was 18 years old. I didn't go vegan until I did the undercover video work for Farm Sanctuary in 2003. People are usually like really surprised to hear that I'm 85 now. I've been vegan. Crazy. So I was somebody, never liked sweet stuff, like I don't eat donuts or pancakes in the morning. I wanted savory. So even as a vegetarian who would walk around with my PETA t-shirts on that's like, meat stinks, yo, right? I'm morally superior to all you all. Eating egg sandwiches, never thinking about it. Loved me some eggs, because chickens just lay eggs, right? Had no idea that if you look at animal suffering across the board in animal agriculture, egg-laying chickens have it the worst. And it starts here. We have created a bird from jungle fowl who would lay about 15 eggs in nature, the way life intended. Through specialized breeding, genetic manipulation, we've created a girl who, like maybe they're 4 to 5 pounds when they're full-grown adults. At the max, that's how much they weigh. Able to push out approximately 300 eggs a year. So, really? Okay, the guy cut into my time. Yeah. So, I'll speed it up some now. But so that they're able to lay 300 eggs a year, that takes a huge toll on their body. And that's why even though chickens, like heritage breed chickens, can live to be 10 years old, 10 to 12 years old, all of these guys, all of these chickens who are used for eggs are killed when they're 18 months to 2 years old. And the day they also start out in these hatcheries, dumped onto conveyor belts. There's people who are trained to sex them. Females go down one chute, males go down another. Again, I've taken the hardcore footage out of here. The males are either ground up alive in what they call a macerator, or they're gathered, put into plastic bags, trash bags, and suffocated. And that is the reality behind every single organic, free-range, cage-free, or commercial egg we consider. That means, let me make the connection. If you had a muffin this morning that had eggs in it, that means just in purchasing that muffin, we're supporting an industry who grinds up alive hundreds of thousands of male chicks every year. And you know what? If I were to be reincarnated as one of these animals, I think I'd rather be reincarnated as one of the males and just have it over with, because the females go on, 97% of egg-laying chickens in this country go on to live in battery cages. And this is what this looks like, and it's not graphic. metal grated floor. Somebody died next to you, their corpse is there for weeks, rotting, you're stepping on it, smelling it. There's no comfortable, or doing even the most basic things that make life tolerable. That's what we do to these birds. So it was shocking. A lot of people look at veganism and think, like, oh, it's so extreme. Why wouldn't you just eat dairy and eggs? Chickens just lay eggs, right? This is the part that we don't see. And so for me, it was shocking to find out that when we look at the two industries, there's actually more suffering in the egg industry than there is in eating chicken meat. Oh, they're bad, but we don't see the reality of what happens. And also, ladies, those who consider themselves feminist, think about this. Both the egg industry and the dairy industry, which I will touch on, but I don't have a lot of time, are solely based on the exploitation of female reproductive systems and the sabotaging of motherhood when it comes to the dairy industry. So people have this idea of what free-range and cage-free looks like, but it's terribly misleading. And in fact, what little governance is done over these labels is done by the industry itself. This, for example, a cage-free operation. So turkeys, this month, you guys, this month alone, 46 million turkeys will be slaughtered. We will celebrate around the carcass of a bird who had part of her face cut off. Many of them now have their toes cut off because they crammed them into these facilities so tightly that the stress causes them to cannibalize one another, to pack and to hurt one another, which can lead to profit loss. So, sorry I'm having to run through this real quick, but it's also really important to point out the difference. Just like in the world of chickens, we have the egg layers, we have the meat birds. Same thing with the cows. We have the beefier, stockier breeds like the Angus, the Herefords, the Simmentals that are specifically used for beef, never used for dairy. And then you've got the common dairy breeds like the Holsteins, the black and white ones, or the Jerseys. The beef cows, at least they get to spend a little bit of time out with their mother on a pasture before they're shipped off to these massive feedlots where grass-eating animals are converted to eating corn and soy. By the way, 80% of our agricultural land and crops in this country are specifically grown to feed the animals at the feedlots and on factory farms. So that's their life, even though cows could live to be 20 to 25 years old. When they reach about 1,200 pounds, which is when they are about 18 months old, they're all sent off to slaughter. So that's their life. But still, as somebody who had gone vegetarian when I was 18, I continued to drink milk. I loved me some cheese. I didn't think I could live without the cheese. Never thought about the fact that human animals, are the only species to consume the breast milk of another species. And we're the only species that can consume breast milk into adulthood. Isn't it funny, like if I were lactating right now, and I filled up a little cup and I'm like, here, you want to try it? Like, oh my God, it's so gross. You can suggest that, and isn't that weird? I'm your species. But we have totally normalized consuming the breast milk of this other sweet, docile animal who just so happens to have giant cow boobs and produces lots of milk. So isn't that strange? What if I gave you, PETA had done something, I think it's PETA, there was a woman who had a little display booth set up in Australia, and she was giving out these samples of milk, and people were drinking. She was like, it's a new type of milk, blah, blah, and people are drinking it, and it was like undercover video. And then she tells people after they've tried it that it's dog milk, that they've started harvesting dog breast milk. You'd see people like do the spit take and throw the place, and oh my God! And isn't that interesting? That is so much a part. That's because we're so indoctrinated to think that consuming the breast milk of cows is natural, normal, and necessary. And a lot of people also think that they have this, and, you go to the store and you look at Organic Valley cartons, and there's like happy cows out on a pasture, and there's like a mom petting the cow with her daughter underneath her out in the grass. First of all, less than 5% of dairy cows ever see a blade of grass. 90% of them live indoors. Also, cows are not this magical animal who comes into the woods spurting milk from her bosom for all to enjoy. They are mammals like us. She's forcibly impregnated by artificial insemination, typically by the time she's only 13 to 14 months old. Like us, they're mammals her body only creates breast milk for her calves. Like us, she carries her baby for 9 months, and all her maternal instincts are kicking in, and she's ready to mother. But the very day they're born, there's nothing practical here. The very day her calves are born, on these factory farms and on small farms alike, the babies are taken away from them the very day they're born. They're lucky if they get to drink that first milk, the colostrum, but oftentimes they just pull the babies away. That milk is for us, right? We don't want the babies drinking the profits. Even though her body made that milk for her babies, we steal it. She'll never see her babies again. And they don't just stand there like automatons, they cry and bellow for days. So when people say to me, as somebody who's been doing this for a long time, I couldn't give up cheese. I hear that in my head. I hear her calling for her calf. And so if we could see the reality, if we had to take those calves away from their moms ourselves, I don't think cheese would be as delicious. Thankfully, there's so many great nut cheeses now. But powering through this, what happens to the babies? Well, if you're a female, you go on to live in these calf huts. If you're in a sanctuary, you would be like frolicking around and jumping and kicking your legs and having a good time. They don't even get the physical comfort and contact with one another. And then they end up, when they're about 4 to 5 months old, they go on to live in group housing. They're called heifers. They're going to replace their mother on the dairy production line. Because even though cows can live to be 20 to 25 years old, all those dairy cows, when they're 4 to 5 years old, after having calf after calf, by the way, I left that part out, 9 months, has her baby. She's given a 3-month break before she's artificially inseminated again. She's milked throughout her entire next pregnancy. The cycle continues over and over until she's 4 to 5. Because she's got painful mastitis, pus dripping from her breast, also calcium leach to her bones, they send them all to slaughter when they're just at a fraction of the age they could normally reach. And that's where hamburger meat comes from. So hamburger meat, like McDonald's meat, is the spent ground-up bodies of dairy cows. So I know that I'm running out of time, but I just have to, can I go 5 minutes over? Can I go 5 minutes over? Yeah. This is hugely important. I don't want to forget about pigs on this state especially. Somehow in our society, we care more about animals who we think are more intelligent. So that's why there's like save whales and protect the elephants and get those chimps out of the labs. Somehow pigs got left out of this. Pigs are known to be the 4th or 5th smartest animals on the planet. It's primates, dolphins, elephants, pigs, and crows. They have the cognitive complexity of 3-year-old children. They're more trainable than dogs. At the sanctuaries, they're the only animals who don't want to like poop where they sleep. They will go outside unless they're old and arthritic and their legs hurt. It's totally understandable. But they won't use the bathroom where they sleep. They go outside and use the bathroom. But again, somehow pigs, and we shouldn't base our compassion on intelligence. That's a slippery slope. But pigs are known to be highly intelligent. The females that we use for making more piglets, they have it worse. They go to live in these gestation crates, which are cages that are barely bigger than the size of their bodies. They're artificially inseminated. They carry the baby. Their pregnancy lasts for about 3.5 months. This is it. This is her life. This isn't just the nighttime quarters. This is day in and day out. Incredibly intelligent animal who can even take a step forward, who can't look back. They lose their minds in these cages. They exhibit all sorts of abnormal psychological behaviors, head tossing, air chewing, chewing at the bars until their teeth break off and their mouths are bloody. And the only time she gets out of those cages is when she's marched to typically Another area of the same building where she's put into a Faraday crate, which is just as restrictive, but there's more room between them so that the babies can get in there and nurse. Babies in nature would nurse for 15 weeks, but they're all taken away from their mothers when they're 12 to 15 weeks old. And right in front of their mothers, even though it's so stressful to pigs, even like at sanctuaries when we're trimming hooves and we've got to like snare somebody to hold them still. Once a pig starts screaming and gets upset, everybody gets worked up. All the other pigs get really upset. During their first week of life, there's going to be some workers coming through, and without any pain relief and with some blunt tools, they castrate them, they cut their tails off, they notch their ears, they rip out or cut their incisor teeth, which become like needle sharp. I'm sparing you the video on this one, but all without any pain relief whatsoever. If you did that, what if your neighbor was breeding, let's say, Doberman Pinschers, okay? Nobody should be breeding dogs anywhere, just saying, some of you are dying at shelters, don't breed. So, but what if your neighbor was breeding Doberman Pinschers, which are one of these breeds of dogs that they cut off their ears, they dock their tails. What if you heard like agonizing puppy screams from next door, and you went over and found out that with this litter, they were just going to save some money with their vet, and they weren't going to pay for any anesthesia or pain relief. They were doing their own neutering, ear cropping, tail docking, all of it themselves. There would be outrage. So, in the end, those piglets go on to live in these crowded pens for 6 months, or when they reach 250 pounds. Once they're mothers, after being impregnated over and over again, when her litter numbers start to decline, she goes right in here with these guys. And in the end, these highly, highly intelligent animals are killed right in front of one another. And there is, please, no, there is no such thing as humane slaughter. It's an oxymoron. And I just want to wrap up and let you know that you should have this experience yourself at Iowa Park Sanctuary, one of the local sanctuaries. This is who pigs are. When they're loved and treated with kindness, this is who they are. She smelled my armpit. I think I'm a little stinky. So just to wrap up, you guys, just in what I've talked about here, think about this seemingly innocuous, uber-common breakfast sandwich. Maybe somebody this morning, before you came here, had a bacon, egg, and cheese biscuit or a sausage, egg, cheese sandwich. It's like the trifecta of cruelty. And this is what's wrong, is that it's so invisible to us. And it's that comfortable cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is saying one thing, believing in one thing, and doing another. If you say you're against animal cruelty and you're grabbing one of these sandwiches, this is what we need. This is the seed that I'm trying to plant for you guys. Even though that suffering and that violence lurks in the distance, when we purchase and consume these products, we are complicit. So I hope today you'll walk away with some great tools and resources and wonderful organizations to support, and you'll see that vegans ain't eating like steamed broccoli over brown rice. It is not a diet of culinary celibacy. It is one of living